So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. The panelists of Monday Live are on mondaylive.org. The most important thing here is that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do use the chat and Q&A. The chat's been very active the last few weeks. That's really, really great. We'd really like to get the collaboration going with everybody. And also a reminder that this slide deck is on mondaylive.org if you want to see any of the links that we share on it. So this month we are talking about Division 2525 specification. So this is the fourth Monday. Yeah, I'm trying to count here. Continuing on that, our agenda, our normal chit chat, and then we'll talk about really sort of deploying the Division 2525 spec, and also why we did this, because we really want to get people sort of feedback in terms of our rationale and the purpose of the whole spec, and have a broader discussion about that. So that's our agenda. Before we get into that, I want to hand it over to Ken.
Thanks, Anto. It's only one more week to showtime, which I think that means that there's no Monday Live. I'll have you confirm that when I turn it back to you, but I think that's the plan for next Monday, is enough of our folks are going to be in Vegas. Actually, thank you very much. The bulk of the folks are part of our free education sessions, and the support from the industry has been totally amazing, and the quality and quantity of speakers is way beyond anything we've ever had in the past 22 years. So very proud of that, and thank you very much, industry, for supporting Automated Buildings free sessions and AHR. Special thanks to Scott Cochran, who has picked up the slack and basically putting these all together and have people on site. And we have some limited video, or some limited remoteness, I guess, to this event. If you actually contact the speakers of each of these events, they might be able to give you a URL that you'll be able to follow along remote if you're unable to make it. I'm totally amazed at the amount of folks that are actually showing up on site, so we're in good shape there. We're going to have, I didn't put it on the slide here, I should have, our February issue is going to be on. It'll be our show issue. We'll get it on about Saturday. The theme is Vegas Wins and Wins. The first win is spelled W-I-N-D, and the next one is just W-I-N, so wins and wins. So I think there's going to be lots of information transferred. I think everybody's just jumping up and down because they miss Chicago. They want to tell you what's happened, so that everybody's got the new products that they had ready for Chicago. Now they've got all the new products they've got ready for Vegas. So I think they've got a lot to tell you. Mark has reinvented our Connection Community Collaboratory. Mark and I started this probably about 10 years ago in Chicago, I believe. And we tried to figure out what is it we all do. And we finally figured that it was that we're a connection community. We basically connect things. And no matter how we look at ourselves, that's what we do. So we'd ran these sessions where we would just get together and have a high-level chit-chat. And I threw the torch to Mark this year, and he got it and turned it into a forest fire. And he's basically has reinvented the whole session. You can see his session there at the bottom of the slide: insights, trends, perspectives, and an open conversation with industry influencers. And look at the folks he's rounded up to speak. Amazing. So thank you very much, Mark. Make sure that you, if you're in Vegas, go see that session. If you're unable, talk to Mark, and he can probably give you a URL to let you take a peek at what's going on. Also, starting conference off with our first session is navigating to smarter. You see, we picked up the Monday Live lingo, smarter, sustainable BAS. It's going to be hosted by Scott and myself remotely, Brad remotely, and real-time Mark Peacock and real-time Kimberly Brown. So it should be a fun chit chat, and we will then introduce all of our 10 sessions. So really pleased and excited, and that's next Monday. Back to you. Maybe you could add some clarity.
Yeah, I'll actually talk about that later.
Okay.
About HR. We will be dark next week, but I'll talk about that. But thank you, Ken.
Okay.
So, John?
Yeah, hi. So I only have one story to share this week, but I thought this was interesting. It's a topic that's come up in a number of different ways, which is, where is the money to help green, sustainable, energy efficient buildings? What are the challenges in return on investment and procurement, in how the organizations who build and manage buildings look at their finances? Most of us in the industry see a clear financial value to these technologies. But one of the things that's been coming into the space to help address this is the idea of green loans, loans specifically for improving sustainability, energy efficiency. And I thought this was interesting, commentary that Europe leads on green loans. But the point is the rest of the world seems to be catching up. So thought I'd share that because, as we've talked a number of times, the financial justification has to be there for organizations to make these investments.
Great, thank you, John. I have got a couple of things. I think we've been sort of monitoring sort of repurposing of buildings, and for a while I've been wondering what's going to happen to all those parking lots. So this is kind of one way of thinking about parking lots. A company is basically building a network of eVTOL vertiports. That needs to roll off the tongue easier than that. But no, anyway, so this is kind of interesting. Obviously, anticipating flying cars and taxis and stuff like that. And the other thing that I saw last few days on the supply chain that we've been talking about also is that it's affecting Girl Scout cookies. So that's a major problem, I think. And so anyway, those are kind of my two things. But the transportation, I think the transportation in the next 5 years is going to be pretty dramatically changing. So I'm really enthusiastic to learn about that. And also obviously the impact to buildings. How is that going to impact how we think about buildings? So that's what I have. Anybody else? I think that's the last one. Go ahead, Mark.
So just want to let everybody know that the latest issue of Haystack Connections magazine is now out. And if you haven't gotten an email on it, go to project-haystack.org and go to the marketing site, and you can download it there. 70 plus pages, some great articles and content going on within the Haystack community. So we're really excited that, again, this is the 10th issue of the magazine. So us, John and I, and the rest of the folks who are pushing Haystack from the, managing it, are really excited about it. So take a look. I think you'll find some great content.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, the community is what's driving this worldwide. So articles, case studies, examples from people implementing projects, building tools, etc., really shows the energy of the community worldwide. It's a great additional issue, 10th one. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I was looking at that over the weekend. There's a lot of great stuff in there. Any other comments from anybody else before we move on? Hearing no. As Ken said, we're all going to Vegas. I think all of us on the screen are going to Vegas, except Ken, I think. Sorry, Ken. So see you there if you're going there. So we will be dark. There is a session. It's actually part of the Scott Cochran managed session on Monday on the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. We have a session between 1:30 and 3 o'clock on Monday, next Monday. This is obviously all local time. It'll be quite interesting because obviously the focus is on the coalition, but a lot of what the coalition is doing is very tied to what we're doing here on Monday Live, including the key sort of elements like the Smarter Stack and the Div 2525 specs. So there'll be a lot of discussions about that. So that's for next week, and we'll be dark next week as Monday Live, and then we're back in February on the 7th of February. Our focus on February is really starting to think about how we're going to deliver smarter buildings. We talked about the sort of the mechanics of the Smarter Stack and what we think about all of the different issues, and then we've talked about the specs. But the thinking here is of the group is that we'd really like to start to get to the nitty-gritties as to how we use all of these different tools to deliver smarter buildings. So that's the focus on February, although the first show on the 7th will, I'm sure, be talking about AHR Expo as a sort of a debrief on that for those that are not attending. So this being January still, so we're talking about Division 2525 specs. This is the sort of our mind map of how we're thinking about this. It's nothing new. I've just sort of put this up every week just to remind ourselves that we're taking the Smarter Stack and using that to create this what we're calling Division 2525 specification. It being based on the stack, really the question that we've been sort of figuring out or toying with in our private discussion is, why are we doing this? What is the purpose of all of this work towards Division 2525? So I'm going to stop the share and open it up to the group, the Monday Live group, and would very much like to get people's opinions on chat as to what we're saying and what you're seeing. So
Hunter, you're saying we have to eat our own dog food and actually use the stack to justify the work we're doing? What a concept.
Recursive.
Recursive, exactly. I think it was great discussion around that, and a great question for us to verbalize that, the thing that I think we all feel and has driven us to invest the effort in this. So I have one I'll share, but I wasn't intending to go first with that wisecrack. So.
But you are first, so you have the floor.
All right, I'll read mine, So
Okay.
What's the purpose of the 2525 initiative? It's to provide the marketplace with a vendor-neutral specification that comprehensively addresses the multi-layered stack of technologies and functionality that are now required to deliver to the promise of smart, sustainable buildings. And to do that with vendor-neutral language that's contributed by numerous industry experts that represent these different technology domains, because it isn't just a control system anymore, right? It's this larger view of interoperability, drawing on your comment last week, Anto, moving away from the word of integration, because that's actually a different thing. And there isn't a specification language that addresses that comprehensive view. And so that's how I saw the purpose.
Open it up. Anybody else? Comment on John's or?
As usual, John does a great job of wordsmithing
Yes.
what it is we're all about. So good job, John.
I'll throw it in the chat for everybody. How's that?
Right. So it's in the last week, I've been working with an engineering firm who got a contract with a large firm out of Asia who's doing design, who's been asked to do a redesign of their basis of design for data centers. So they build and lease out space in data centers. They do this all over the globe. And what I find fascinating about the exercise is this is a traditional firm with a lot of expertise in mechanical, electrical, and MEP. They're an MEP organization. But what they've been asked to do is cut out 2/3 of the cost of the IT infrastructure. So as part of the design. So it's not just, cut energy spend on the data center itself, which is also part of their scope, but they're being asked to look at the backbone infrastructure from an IT perspective, meaning the routers, the switches, the firewalls, the virtual servers, all of that, because the company feels that they're spending way too much on the IT infrastructure, and they've gone to this firm to help them decide what to do. And what it's pointed out is that convergence is happening very quickly here, and between IT and OT, and that I think everybody on this call recognizes and appreciates that we, in order to put our latest technology into buildings, we rely on these we rely on the IT infrastructure standard components to make it all work. So somebody has to take on this job of deciding what the infrastructure is going to look like. Who's going to specify that? Well, this firm is reaching out for help because it's not something that they've got great expertise in. And yes, they could call in a managed service provider who is an IT company, and they will help. But the MSPs that are in the space don't really understand the full challenges involved in doing OT. So in my mind, this is a reason why the specifications are needed, because we need to provide good guidance on what that should look like. So if you look at, I think it's the delivery line, which is where I typically think of the IT network showing up, and how you would specify the components that go there. But I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to help the industry know what the hell to do, because it's not obvious. And unless you've got the background in it and have some understanding of what's required, what does a typical MEP do to specify the IT infrastructure that's needed by our control systems in this day and age? Because you guys all know that we're putting more and more stuff up on IP networks. Fewer and fewer is going to be on 45, traditional 45 and LAN in the future, and that's how it's going. So whether it's wired or wireless, and how you get out of the building to the internet, the various ways you do that, because more and more of the applications are going up to the cloud. So it takes so much more expertise in terms of IT knowledge for us to deploy our systems. And that's just the raw communications and infrastructure. It doesn't even talk about the data itself and how it gets represented and shared across all the different systems. That's why we have the stack, right? Is to recognize that that's a separate issue. But the fundamental piece that I'm seeing that this particular firm needs, and I don't think they're at all unusual, is that they don't have a lot of expertise in-house. And why would they necessarily have it in terms of helping a customer decide what that infrastructure is going to look like? So that's my recent, I basically felt all along that this was going to be a need, which is why I spent a lot of time in that area. But this just has driven it home for me just how significant the problem is and how much help is needed to help our community know what to do and how to do it.
That's great, Steve. Yeah, that's wonderful. It's kind of interesting because the words that I wrote as a why are we doing this actually sort of combines what John was saying and what you're saying. And the first part of it is that the concept of a Division 25 has been around for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And yet somehow I'm not aware of anybody that's actually created a really good one that's broadly used. Right. And certainly I'm not aware of any good ones that are open source or available to the public domain. So that was the purpose to me, half of it. And the other half of it, I would actually describe what you're saying, Steve, as what we really want to do is we want to build a bridge at the specification point between what we're doing in BAS and IT, and potentially other sort of groups of people that we don't normally think about, but IT is the main one. There are people that like ERP people and things like that. So to me, the bridge is actually very important. And I know that we've had some discussions in the last couple of weeks about how close we should tie this into the CSI specification, because CSI, the C stands for construction, and in a way we actually want to move away from construction and focus on the operations. So
Yeah.
there's to me, that's one end of the bridge is the Division 25 things. Open it.
If I could
No,
chime in here, because well done, Steve. That was a great dissertation. That's exactly the problem as I see it is it's a very moving target in what we're doing. The necessity is obvious. There's no doubt of nobody's questioning that this is needed. I'm still not a big fan of tying it to 2525 because I believe it's a now kind of document that's required. It's required by IT folks who have no inkling of what's happening. The other trend that's happening is we're building less and less new buildings, and more and more of our work is fixing what's broken. So I think that's another side of it.
Just to
I'll
echo on,
just-
oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, it's interesting you had that conversation, Steve, because I had a similar, almost verbatim conversation with another large engineering firm last week on this same exact subject. And one thing that they pointed out to me was, while these specifications are needed, the thing that people need to understand, if we don't do specifications, there will be more buildings that fail than more buildings that succeed. And we all, whether it's our end of it, their end of it, we all need to get this, we want successful deployments and implementations. And so what the ultimate thing was, we've got to have this because this is new stuff. Nobody knows crap for the most part, and we need guidelines, to your exact same point. So nice done.
Just to echo back to Ken's point, tying it to the 25, and I think we've had several discussions about that right on the Wednesday calls about where does it really belong. It'd be interesting to get to poll get some of the response from the attendees on this. I'm in the same boat as Ken, right? 25 to me ties a little bit too much to the old school CSI construction. That's what it stood for, right? Construction Standards Initiative, which again, we're trying to bridge into that, where's that space. The counter argument is, and we've all seen this in the last few months, there's a lot of initiatives about, connectivities and new standards and stuff coming out. One of the things I'm concerned about is, are we adding to the confusion? The beauty about tying it to CSI is it's a well-known format, structure, standards, people are aligned to it. If you don't tie it to something solid like that, then you become one amongst all the others that are out there as well. So not sure what the answer is for that.
I think we chatted a little bit about moving on two fronts simultaneous, which I think is a good approach. Is that I have no problem with it being tied and maybe nurtured and created in the 25 image, but I think the immediacy of it is what's driving us. It's something that's needed now. Even some of our bad ideas shared now would be better than nothing. I've learned a tremendous amount just by listening to you guys mumble about what it is we're talking about.
One of the things I've found kind of interesting in this whole effort, ever since all this work kind of started here in the group, is the intention of Division 25 way back when was about sharing data and integrating systems and so forth. And back in the day when this was created, there weren't systems that existed like there are today, even in the amount of data that is available. And more importantly, the variety of devices now available that can communicate, right? So it occurred to me when we first started talking about this, I've always thought of this as, oh, Division 25, that's the integration place, right? And that's probably because I come at it from a controls viewpoint, and that's what it's always been about to me. That's how I see the world. But it still is very much applicable, and even more so at this point. And the version that will likely come out of this effort will go far beyond the vision of the original architects that sort of left that space in the CSI stack, if you will, for this type of activity. But I was amazed after coming, I heard about it way back when, and the first time I came back to it to try to research it, which was probably 7 or 8 years ago, 7 years ago, let's say, that there was nothing there. There's nothing in it. And it's just a blank spot that was kind of reserved for the most part, right? So I think it's long overdue that something like this gets put together and published out there with groundwork or foundational work that sort of includes things that we deal with today, not the way the original architects of this document kind of saw the world, right? So I'm really looking forward to the output of this thing. I think it'll be
What are
extremely helpful.
the meetings you missed, Tracy? There was some discussion that was good. It talked about that maybe what we need to do is put our focus on defining what it is we need, what the purpose at the top of the stack is, and to work on putting stacks together like Lego blocks to try and lay a pattern out for how this might all fall. And I think what the big advantage of that is we can probably do that quicker. And then once the stack is kind of built and the words have been attached to it, I think then the wordsmiths can go away and the various vendors can look at it and we can kind of work out the details. So it might give us a plan to kind of get from here to there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. The way that it was originally architected was intended to be modular anyway, right? So that makes perfect sense that we just follow that same structure. Everybody, one of the things with introducing something new like this is paying attention to the adoption and learning curve, right? And the more we can kind of follow that original architecture and this thing comes out and sort of looks and smells like, specs, that CSI specs that people have been quoting and using for a long time, the more likely this will be more readily adopted, I think.
So Roger, being across the pond, do you see similar things going in the European marketplace? Kind of what's your view on this whole specifications, and especially for the newer things that weren't around 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, so I was going to ask the question because, from my time when I was in the US, 25 was around. I suppose I was going to ask the question, how much as the BAS party is it adopted across the US now? Because certainly here in the UK, and I sense the same as the rest of Europe, is that other than a few of the major consultants like Arabs who've worked with Google, I see Sabine's on people, but Arabs have always had a strong specification as a consultant, but not many do. And so a lot of people don't, a lot of the consultants don't even have a controls person. And so they've been cutting and pasting the same stuff forever, but at least you've got something there that you're working around. And I think that, the consultants have a lot to answer for here in trying to actually do it, because, when a spec comes out that is just cut and paste around a particular manufacturer's solution, and then you add in the standard bits, and then they start just adding all the bits in from everyone, it all gets disjointed, which is what we've seen a lot of, and people have struggled to actually meet the overall specification because there's too much in there and reaching out in different ways. But is Division 25, the BAS part, widely adopted across the US now? I mean, the BAS spec, is there a standard spec that's?
I think it's safe to say the CSI format overall is widely adopted and used, but Division 25 has always been out there as this, kind of part of it that was so open to interpretation and therefore, I think abused
Yeah.
a lot. So no, it's not widely the Division 25. And at least that's what I see. I don't know if the rest of you can comment, but I don't see that. I see that people trying to apply Division 25. There's just been no standard, so it looks different from project to project.
So
is
Tracy, you
weird
see
when
more
you think-
Div 23?
What's that?
Where is it 23 where you're seeing the BAS specified?
Trying to recall all the different divisions, but that sounds.
Yeah, 23 is the HVAC
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah, and everybody has, the original intent was to, how do you cross over disciplines, right? And
Right.
make sure that they're sharing what they need to be sharing and everything is standard. But I think the problem is within those silos, everybody thinks from their view of the world. So the Division 23 stuff that we've seen, fairly complete sometimes, but all about HVAC,
Mhm.
and that side of it, for instance. So
think that-
very little about, when I did some work with another group a few years ago, and even going between HVAC and lighting is not well defined
Right.
and not standardized at all. We spent a lot of time trying to just figure that part out. So.
I think there's a trend also that owners are so frustrated that this has not worked and that their consultants do not know about this, that several of them have taken it back into their own hands and basically put together their own groups. And so what you'll find sometimes is that this doesn't exist anywhere other than in the owner's camp. And I'm not so sure that that's not that's such a bad solution. But what maybe we need to do is take a look at what some of those sophisticated owners are doing and start incorporating those pieces into what we're doing.
Take the best of what's there. I think one of the things that Roger said is going to be is both a blessing and a curse. The curse is people tend to find one and just cut and paste and use it over and over. And unfortunately, the curse part of that is all the vendor specific stuff carries along with it. But if you flip it over, if we can get something out there as a group that's fairly complete and usable, and assume that the behavior will continue, that people will cut and paste, we have a much better job or opportunity to really get this out there. So the behavior is the same in the US, Roger, by the way.
Yeah.
Cut and paste.
Okay, so wanting to move, Jim, did you have any, because I don't think you've commented on why we're doing this?
No, I just as a general comment, I think that I agree with Anno and Ken that, CSI is not necessarily the greatest place to start, but the thing is this helps us build a bridge. Right now, the economic power and the money is still centered around acquisition in the building. And this is where the money is now. So I just view it as a starting point to build a bridge, but build a bridge, beyond, or to either bring in that consulting community or build a bridge to the owner. I just think it's a good place to start. That's my only comment.
Make it a floating bridge.
Floating bridge, okay.
Well,
Yeah,
good.
Bridget,
You'd have thought now is the right time. You're bearing in mind standards are becoming more
Right, yeah.
normalized. People are beginning to actually, as you say, get rid of the silos, or the thinking there is to do it. Whether they can do it or not is another thing. But
Yeah.
just all as we move on now, how many ways can you do a control loop? Waggle a damper on a VAV, or thousands of ways you can sequence a boiler or chillers. I think it's we're driving towards some standards. You would have thought the industry is now kind of screaming out for some specification that doesn't tie you into the very specifics, but actually at least helps you define those areas which some people struggle with, in things like cybersecurity and interoperability and stuff. And if it can be at least put together in a way that people can understand it, it's got to be a plus.
let's move on to the deployment side of things. And I have this just a couple of slides. One is the question is, how are we going to deploy this and make it stick, as it were, as per some of the comments mentioned here. We'd really like to have a conversation on this and have your thoughts. one of the things that we've done is that we're working on a portal, for want of a better word, to put all of this in. And eventually it'll be on div2525.com. If you go there now, it will fail because there's nothing there, because we've put it on specs.div2525.com, and I'll paste that link in the chat in a second. And the idea is to put it somewhere where everybody can get at it. I'm just pasting something here. So if you want to head over there, you can see this. And obviously make this of it. This is not finished. This is work in progress, as the status indicates. Thoughts about how we can get this out there, how we can deploy it. And I mean, this is just the mechanics. The website is just a tool. Thoughts about how we can successfully do this and actually get it out there to be used. How do we make this 2525 viral, as it were? Thoughts?
I think it's sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think there's a couple components to this. One has to do with, I'll use the word credibility, but there's probably more to add to that. But if this is done in such a way that the starting point is fairly well-defined, done in a quality way, and works as a good jumping off point for others who want to adopt this in some way, that'll be a key thing to get it out there and used over and over again. So, and it will be hard because inevitably we'll end up wrestling with, what's specific to a particular use case versus generic enough for everybody to use, right? And the more generic you go, the less of that kind of content will be in it. So finding that right balance and getting it to the right point is one thing. And then just getting the word out in the fact that it's easy and open source, and people, we put it in a format that people can truly cut and paste and don't have to go back through and re-edit and, do a lot of work cleaning it up, I think will be extremely helpful. Just the mechanics of it.
Just before we continue on this conversation, which is great, one of the points that we actually want to make to this group is that we need your help. We don't think we can do it on our own. I mean, I'm sure we could, but I think it's better. It would be better if it's actually a collaborative effort, a broad collaborative effort. So that's one of the asks of today's show, is to see how we can get your contribution. And also that's going to be a big theme of all of the conversations we're having in AHR in Vegas.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on that when you posed the question, how do we get it out there? I'm honestly thinking that the audience, for those people understandably what we're doing, the audience, and there's already one comment there, can suggest ways, right? We all don't play in the same level in the specification community and whatever. So one of them is LinkedIn. So I think that's interesting way, but this would be the first place and one of the easiest places for the community of listeners we have to help us. Just shoot some ideas into the chat. How do we, if this great thing is out there, how do we get it out to the world so they realize it, right?
So
Do we want to do like a, to that point, John, a call for support and contributors in a bit of a LinkedIn campaign? And then later there is a call to redistribute, kind of a campaign in LinkedIn?
We can do that. And just one comment on what John said. I mean, he said to help us. It's not really just to help us. It's actually to help all of us. Right. The big us. So it's not.
The big us, yes.
yes. So, I want to add a point to the discussion around positioning this thing. So we're calling it an interoperability specification, right? And the reason we focused on that is because the obstacle to making buildings smarter is their inability for these siloed systems to interoperate. That's why we're doing this. Okay?
Yes.
And so I think Division 2525 is just one audience for this interoperability specification. The market needs an interoperability specification. We can market that to owners, and then they can say, hey, I to the BAS guy, here's the BA, give me your BAS system, but it must be compliant with this spec for interoperability. I mean, it could be one line in the specification, just must be compliant, and that becomes the basis for how owners can use it. Likewise, consultants can add it into to the entire specification so people know what it is. But the point about how we market this thing, I think we should be marketing it as a smarter building interoperability specification, and not the Division 2525 thing necessarily. Not saying we can't do both, but I don't think we should lose the opportunity to have this thing be a standalone entity unto itself.
I'll
What do
make
you
one
guys think?
tweak. I'll make one tweak to your comment, Steve. I think
Yeah.
it's not just about interoperability; it's about systems interoperability. Because unless you think about it that way, we have interoperability. We have BACnet, right? And
Right.
BACnet and Modbus and a whole bunch of others. So we really need to focus on the systems aspects.
Systems interoperability.
That's
Fair
where
enough.
it all comes
Yeah,
together.
fair enough. Yeah, I agree.
One,
And I
one
was
thing
going
you-
to echo that too, as far as the system interoperability. To me, it's not just about integration anymore and data normalization and, you know, some of the words we all have been using for the last many years. It is this whole interoperability. And then to Anto's point, it's the different systems interoperability, because I think interoperability covers the entire spectrum. If the systems are interoperable, then we're connected, we're integrated, we're automated, we're sharing data that's been cleansed, normalized, and we're doing everything that the value propositions we've been saying for years of what a smarter building value propositions are, is interoperable. So echo that.
Okay, the other thing I'd like to point out is that what we're doing here is touching a lot of things we never touched before. And one of the big markets is the OEM folks that are actually building equipment, because they have to come into this environment, and any words you write of wisdom would be probably picked up and supported by them. And there's probably a whole bunch of folks, if we roll our eyes back, that we traditionally don't deal with. So that's, again, an argument, you know, maybe why it doesn't fit well in 2525, and it has to have a much bigger, broader brush. And I think if we can get it out there and get it in an open source form, then it'll grow and people will give us their perspective and lay it on there. So
I suppose the other thing is who are we trying to target here with this to utilize it? Because, you know, is it the consultants, the real estate, you know, the REIT guys? Is it the smarter customers? And how do we approach those people to make sure that they adopt it? I mean, they're really the guys that are going to help swing it. We want everybody in the industry to recognize it and refer to it and use it, but there's got to be someone, or those, you know, who are the people that we need to actually use it when they're specifying systems.
Just looking at some of the chats, I think everybody agrees that LinkedIn is the good way of doing it. Sabine makes a comment about the details, which is fine, and the system interoperability, what that is. And we actually talked about that last week. And there's actually a lot of work going on that front in several areas, including digital twin related stuff. So you're absolutely right, Sabine, that side of things has to be much more well-defined, just the concept of interoperability between systems. So totally get that.
Mark, you know, you're our head marketing guy. My whole point about positioning this thing as a systems interoperability specification above and beyond Division 25. Do you agree with that?
100%.
Okay.
Anything to communicate the value and the value propositions and the benefits to a wider audience, and go back to your or I forget who was having this conversation, where we want to also get building owners to pull this thing through as well, and so forth and so on. So I think all of that adds to a little bit wider than just Division 2525.
You know, building owners could be key to this whole thing. This is no different than the interoperability battle that we've all been doing for the last 20 years, right? If you get the end users, building owners on board, and they understand and realize this is really in their favor, they really want this, then that will help tremendously.
Yeah, I made a
But they-
suggestion along those lines. Let's reach out to the Realcomm people we know
Yep.
and see if we can get on a webinar and certainly have a presentation at their 2022 event that they're, I believe, planning for June, because they bring the end users together, right?
And there's also, to add to the folks at Realcomm, there's other commercial real estate groups that I think would find this whole system interoperability of interest. And again, typical real estate type thinking sometimes is the leases and all the other stuff. But I think the ops now is starting to become more prevalent in people's thinking and trying to interoperate between all of them. And then one last point is we've definitely seen the OT-IT convergence. There's also now what's adding to this interoperability is the convergence of the operational side with the workplace side, i.e. whether it be indoor air quality, occupancy, so forth and so on. So that, I think, again, bodes well to this whole initiative we're trying to do here.
The digital
Nice.
experience in the building is becoming a bigger part of this.
And John
And to-
John Tierney just made a comment. Smarter building systems interoperability specification. That's a mouthful. If trying to educate the full idea and indicates many relationship, yes. I think that's the point. We talked about that last week as well, quite a bit. Sorry, Anna.
So Skip is also asking: is this the group already able to start talking about it on LinkedIn?
I think we need to wait until after AHR. Well, maybe let's put it out. I think we had a mission back in November, December-ish, that we would have a sort of what we call an MVP of the specs by AHR so that we could socialize it, right? So that's exactly where we are now. Right?
Which
So
is next week. So waiting a week is probably not a big deal, but
right, but
how
do we best do that? I mean, do people just? I mean, the audience. I mean, there's a lot of people in the audience. How can they easily contribute and be part of this and help move this thing forward without actually taking on the task of writing one big spec section?
Yeah, the quickest way at this point is to have the Div 25 website, right? And simplest is to start. There's enough people here and in the audience to start the conversation. LinkedIn is a great multiplier effect, right? Anybody here, we've all got thousands of connections. It can quickly multiply pretty quickly into our space. But it needs to have a place for people to go to.
But should we create a group within LinkedIn, a Div 2525 group to organize around this?
Yeah, probably not a bad idea. Groups work well in LinkedIn.
Can we use a name other than 2525?
Well,
That still sticks in my craw kind of thing, because
well,
I know a whole bunch of
there's a-
people wouldn't contribute to 2525, but would probably contribute to any other name you gave it.
what's in a name? Says Shakespeare.
Everything. I'm just going to say that.
As a marketing person.
I completely agree with that.
So would a LinkedIn group based more on the name talking about system interoperability or something with the word interoperability. I don't want to sit here and name something right now, but again, take on the value point, which in this case is it's all about interoperability within the built environment, something to that effect.
Other thoughts?
Steve Jones put on, sorry, Steve Jones put on here, create a smarter buildings interoperability specifications group. That's a good one.
And IAT's got that Division 2525 group. You can have multiples, of course. I mean,
Yeah,
you can
but anyway.
interconnect them.
Any other brainstorms? Any other thoughts? Just crazy ideas are okay at this point.
One thing just to have in the back of our mind, interoperability is not a new thing. People have been at that forever. So we have to, I mean, it's the outcome we're looking for, but as a name, I'm a little worried that that won't, illustrate.
It won't stand out.
Yeah.
It's also a very difficult word to say and very difficult word to explain what it is, the concept.
Yeah, if we go back to the system or systems terminology, I think that's a good terminology. It just seems to be a lot more complex. Are we making a simple thing more complex? We're trying to simplify stuff in some ways, right?
Yeah, I wrote an article in January, and it's on automated buildings called System or Building Systems, which is very specific. So it's a system of systems that are in buildings. Yeah.
It's not sexy, but very functionally appropriate description, right?
I agree. I agree. Yeah, Sabine, I think you're right. I think alignment, which is what we're doing now, really, essentially, getting alignment between the different groups, and but large corporations will be really helpful for to have alignment with that.
Does Sabine want to come in and chat?
You want to come in and chat, Sabine? Sure. She says. All right, I've got to find her here. Okay. There you go. So Sabine Lam, for those that don't know, is with Google, and she's been around the circuit, as it were. So welcome, Sabine. How are you doing? And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Last minute. I got to say, I'm chatting with Brian Turner on the side, so he may as well be on it too. But you talk about standard. We have standard. I know Thano was talking about standards. There are large real estate owners out there that have standards. I know when you talk about it within this team, there are things I align with and things I don't. And that's where I was like, how do we know that we align, and which one would I support a global standard? It all depends on what's in it, and how do we define what's in it. I feel like there's opportunity to push the industry. You can't have a standard if the industry doesn't have the solution for that standard, which is kind of the approach we have at Google. So we're pushing, and there's very few solution that meet our standard, but that's what I would want to see as your interoperability standard. And that's what I would get behind, but it's a little too early potentially to make that kind of a more general standard. But should I work with Thano of the world and anyone, in other large corporation, and probably should, and I think that's not happening yet. Like, we're working with vendor, we're working with manufacturer, but I'm not working with my counterpart to align on our standard. We're trying to be fairly transparent. But I don't think there's necessarily a full alignment among the stakeholders. So
do you think it's the nature of things so that it will be almost impossible to get full alignment, or do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think it's impossible to get. I mean, it will take longer to get full alignment.
Right.
I think it's also an industry that's very close, where proprietary solution has been the foundation of this industry. So transitioning from that to being fully open and providing open source solution is going to lead to, a different business model. I mean, you're kind of disrupting the whole thing, right? So I don't think we can come in and say, oh, here's the new standard and everybody's going to jump on it, because
Right.
you're kind of leading to quite a bit of disruption. So, but nonetheless, where we're pushing it, and I think anyone, I should work with Boston Property and any one large owner. Not at all. We're not doing it. So I think the push should be, and the reminder, like in those large conference, like, okay, large real estate owner, you want to see a change, you drive the change, put it on us to drive the change. And we surround ourselves with people like you to know what those change should look like and what is possible. But I wonder, I obviously don't have the solution, but I don't know that I can be behind any standard today, because I feel like the one I would want to be behind is not possible to embrace right now for smaller company. The solution is not really there.
But it'd be
You have-
interesting, I guess, with Kathy Farrington, Richard Reed and the rest of the guys that you've been working on this sort of stuff for quite some time now. It'd be interesting for you to make a comparison with what you've done and what what is in the document now, to see how far adrift it is from your thinking, and kind of give it that feedback, because I wonder how far off it is from what you've done.
Yeah, I have the block diagram on one of my little window here where I was supposed to put what our platform looks like. Basically what we're doing is I was talking to Ken about that last week. We're eliminating the subsystem. We're going directly from the device to cloud. And we're saying, hey, it's not a system of systems. We're going from raw data to this integration platform. Or it's not even integration, right? We're raw data into one location. And that's where the integration is happening. And so, but we're saying, hey, we're eliminating all those third-party solution pretty much. I mean, although they still exist, because that's what you need to use to set up the systems in the first place. But as far as historical data and analysis, we just completely skip the third-party vendor. API is not a thing. We just say every device needs to stock a very specific language and come and send the data to cloud directly. And that's what we're pushing for. But not everybody can. Like I said, there's very few manufacturers that are capable of doing that. So we go through Gateway, or we go through other, and it's very IP heavy. Again, not every company wants to go IP heavy. It is a cost on the network. Somebody was talking earlier about reducing IP and network costs. We're doing the opposite, right? We're kind of cranking up the number of IP devices within our building. We think it's just the best way to manage and have visibility of the devices and control it back, because the idea is not just one way, it's both ways to control it back. But we're not believing in API, and we're not doing API to API anything. We're just like raw data, and we're translating along the way and normalize it into the cloud platform.
So you mentioned not many vendors can do this. Do you not think that there may be another question, is whether they want to do it?
Right. I mean,
commercial? Yeah.
and that's why I say, if there's more of the large corporation that ask for it, the manufacturer, they would have to do it.
Yeah.
But if they can get around the system and not have to do it, they won't. And even I would say within Google, right, we had certain regions that were asking for less, and they got less for the longest time until we put our foot down and say, well, sorry, now you can't be bidding on our building if you cannot provide that capability. It's very much a stick and carrot thing. If they can still bid and still get business with their traditional approach, they will continue doing that. And so you have to get to the point where the standard is absolutely the right approach, right? But I'm just saying it's hard to, I think it's really hard for all corporations to get behind one standard. And so it's more like a little step at a time before you can make it global.
And
I
we've
just
all
wanna
seen
throw-
this, right? I mean,
I just want to throw
Sorry.
out the idea that the way we've constructed the stack, and I don't see where we need to preclude what you're doing. It can include what you're doing. In other words, a vendor could say, I can do this, or I can do that. And because it's really how you move the data from the lower part of the stack to the higher part of the stack. And I don't know what the rest of you think, but I don't see where, if Google wants to use the spec and require that, and you could, of course, take a bid for the conventional approach, if you will, and you can make a business decision whether it's something you want to accept or not. But my feeling is we've got enough flexibility in the way we've designed this thing that we could put in the Google
But-
methodology.
If you give the flexibility, then you don't encourage change, right? Because if you can do the systems of systems where people use the API, then you continue with your proprietary solution. The vendor has to make no change. They just give you an API, and you're the one, the Patty of the world, that have to do, like develop the different API and the integration and maintain it over time and expand it with new vendors.
Yeah.
Like there's one person that does all that work. You're not changing the industry. You're just
Well, the industry
mandating
does
it.
change.
I mean, like-
The industry does change over time, only because new buildings get built and existing buildings get retrofitted. But the owners need to deal with, we've got 10 million buildings, commercial buildings out there that have all kinds of installed systems in them, and we need to deal with that reality. And the spec allows those owners to not have to do a complete rip and replace. So to the degree where there's something new going in, you could follow your approach while still supporting a conventional approach for the things that are already there and are not ready to be replaced.
Maybe you have two standards then, but for new
Yeah.
construction, you want to be quite strict. If
I'm
you want to
also-
see change, like there's one, you have to make it really push for change. If you do
I'm
the
also
opposite,
sort of
it's-
questioning your use of the word standard. If it's the whole thing as a standard, then I think most of us will agree that it's too much to standardize. But some standard mechanisms or standard ways of doing
Right.
things, I think it's different.
I was going to bring that up earlier when I heard Sabine started, the way that she uses the language in the term standard. To me, our effort feels more like a framework than a standard.
Right.
Right. And it's very outcome driven, to Steve's point, and very agnostic of the way that gets implemented, as far as I know, right? We're not specifying thou shall have gateways or thou shall have device direct to cloud or anything like that necessarily. It's the outcome, and whether you do that at a device level, a gateway level, an API level, maybe is a little less important.
Yeah, the interoperability
That's
can
a
be
better way to say
anywhere
it.
in the whole chain.
Right.
Yeah.
From edge to
So,
cloud.
yeah, this has been great. Really appreciate your comments, Sabine, and we're well past time, so we need to bring this to a wrap. So again, those of you who are going to be in Vegas, see you there. And otherwise, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And thank you all. And video will be up tomorrow as normal. So have a great week and have a great time in Vegas. Bye-bye all.
Hey guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.